On your Thursday episode of Locked On Raptors, the Toronto Raptors continue their Summer League odyssey, picking up a win over the Utah Jazz yesterday, 80-74. We'll sort of talk about the game, but we'll mostly talk about big picture Summer League stuff. Justin Champagnie, a member of the Summer League team before getting hurt, has signed a 2-year minimum deal with the team. We'll get into that. Plus, we will draw on the Vegas experiences from Katie Heindl, who just arrived back from Vegas and was covering the Raptors down there. We'll get to all that and more on today's episode of Locked On Raptors.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? Welcome to episode number 1216 of Locked On Raptors for Thursday, July the 14th. I'm your host, Sean Woodley of RaptorsHQ.com. You can find me on Twitter, as always, at WoodleySean. You can find the show at Locked On Raptors, and you can follow, subscribe to, rate, review the podcast for free on all your favorite podcast apps in audio form. You can also go to YouTube and support the show there. And apologies to those watching on YouTube today, as I'm just a big sweaty mess. I just got back from a very long bike ride, and my body's doing the thing where it's still just like sweating post-workout. This is what I get for being healthy, so I'm sorry, and please don't turn it away. Just envision it as a glow instead of sweat, and you'll have your total mind frame changed around. All right, speaking of glowing on account of the sweat, Katie Heindl was in Vegas this past week covering Summer League, and on today's show, we are going to dig in to the Raptors' voyage down there. They're now 2-1 after a win over the Jazz yesterday. We will get into the signing of Justin Champagnie, and then we'll play a little Vegas Summer League rapid-fire game with Katie, just so we can live a little vicariously through her, anyone who is not down there in Vegas. But Katie, how are you? What's going on? Welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. I'm good. My voice is not come back with me. I want to give you a shout out for giving me a buffer day yesterday, because every time I sat down yesterday, I'd fall asleep. I just felt like I had narcolepsy. So tired. I napped like 2 hours after waking up in the morning, and it just persevered like all day. So thank you. I can't say I'm acclimatized, but here I am.
You're powering through. This is your flu game. This is your is there like a syndrome, like is there like a name for the syndrome that happens after you leave Vegas after being there for 6 days or whatever it was you were there for?
There is a syndrome. It's not a Vegas thing, but this is, I guess, maybe getting too scientifically deep into the show, but there's a syndrome called holiday heart, which it was named that, like, I think long time ago, because it sounds very romantic. So I feel like that's like a 1800s thing. But when you come back from holiday and you're like, you haven't really slept a lot, maybe you've been indulging a little bit, you notice like your heart is racing more. Anyway, I don't actually feel that way. I just feel tired. But I don't know what the Vegas syndrome is. Like a huge withdrawal. I always feel so sad when I come home.
Well, I'm sorry we're doubling down on the sadness by forcing you to talk to me for half an hour.
That's okay.
Holiday Heart, my favorite 1980s holiday band.
Doesn't it sound like
album.
Something that would be cured with like cocaine when they still would, like when doctors would still prescribe people cocaine? That's what I mean. Not like okay.
I was more going for the band Heart in a holiday album. That's what I was aiming for. But I botched the punchline. That's fine. Katie, we're going to talk about Summer League today. Let's begin with the news that came down today, that Justin Champagnie, who has not played in Summer League for the Raptors because of a thumb injury, has signed a 2-year minimum deal with the Raptors. We'll get your sort of bigger, broader takeaways from Summer League itself in a sec here, but Champagnie is the news, and I have been very, very staunch in my belief that Justin Champagnie is going to weasel his way into the rotation at some point next season. Weaseling sounds bad. He's going to find his way into the rotation on the merit of his good play next season at some point. Glad to see that his absence from Summer League didn't affect the Raptors' view of him and their sort of vision for him and their long-term plans. Thoughts on Champagnie's signing? And you caught up with Champagnie down in Vegas, correct? What were your sort of impressions of him and the way the team views him and all that stuff?
Yeah, I did. The team, because the Raptors schedule, like on the Summer League schedule, was it's like just at the end of it.
Yeah.
I only actually caught one game, their first game when I was there.
Mm-hmm.
But they had a ton of practices. They had a practice or a shoot around every day, which
That's
was
great.
fantastic. So I went to a bunch of those before the games even got underway. And the first guy I sat down with was Justin. We talked about, I talked about like wait, do you want to talk about this yet? Or you want to talk about the contract?
No, go nuts. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll do a sprawling Justin Champagnie conversation.
Great exercise in me trying to keep it together. Well, I wanted to talk to him about coming into this team, as like it's like essentially veteran player, right, on the summer league roster, and what that meant to him, and how he wanted to approach leadership, because it was mostly him and Dalano who have the most experience at summer league and with this roster. And he said he was really looking forward to it, and like the energy that he wanted to bring to the floor. He is such an energy guy. He wanted to show that at both ends. I talked to Trevor Gleason about it too, and he said, he's got such great defensive capabilities, but we don't want to just see him be a one-trick pony. So it's a huge bummer that he got hurt in their first scrimmage. I think it was later that same day after I spoke with him. They had a close scrimmage against the, I want to say, Hornets.
Okay.
Summer league team.
Sure.
And that's when he got hurt. So I was pretty bummed because I wanted to watch him play, but I also wanted it to be an opportunity for him to showcase that so he could go on and get signed. So I'm extremely thrilled that, as you said, that didn't affect what probably the organization already had, like in the works. Because obviously they value him tremendously, and I think they understand what he brings to the team, even if he wasn't able to bring that to the summer league team.
Yeah, I didn't think that his injury was going to cost him getting signed by the Raptors necessarily, just because, they invested a whole year of him in the G League and gave him a lot of run and agency down in the G League to just kind of fire off half a dozen threes a game and be part of the sort of the flow of the offense in a pretty substantial way. So that I'm glad to see he's going to be around. And I think one of the most interesting conversations going into next year in terms of like training camp battles and things like that, I think it's pretty established. There's a top 9 on this team that is going to be pretty entrenched just because, they bring in Otto Porter to complement the rest of the guys they had last year, and the continuity is going to be fantastic. That I don't think is going to really change all that much over the course of the preseason. I think actually John Schumann, who does this sort of continuity rankings every year in terms of roster turnover, assuming the Raptors don't go and trade for Kevin Durant, they're going to be number 1 in terms of roster continuity, in terms of minutes played last season and the guys who played them now being on the team again this year. So that's why I kind of think it's going to be tough to crack the top 9 to begin the season. But that sort of 10th guy, next guy in for injury, which we know injuries will happen. The Raptors had a lot of them last year. There are going to be opportunities for this guy, or these guys. I think it's sort of between like the old head in Cam Birch and then sort of the Koloko, Banton, Champagnie trio kind of fighting for that role as 10th guy on the team. Where do you think Champagnie kind of fits into that? And just in terms of like the skills he brings, the offensive rebounding acumen, of course, the defensive switchability, the improved 3-point shooting at the G League level last year. Very different player than Dalano Banton, who we talked about a lot on yesterday's show. But where do you think Champagnie kind of fits into that nexus of dudes trying to fight to be the next man up?
The nexus of dudes. Well, he's so versatile, right? Like that's probably his trademark and calling card. Which is like funny. You can't really pigeonhole a guy like that because he doesn't just do one thing ever.
Yeah.
So I think he fits like, if it's a competition for that 10th spot, as you're saying, I think it could clearly be him. It just that kind of almost feels like a given. Granted, there don't seem to ever be any givens with the Raptors, like around those spots, like the last 2 seasons, I think they've been kind of tinkering with the roster.
Yeah, they usually just don't use those spots. Nurse will just be like 7 guys is fine, right?
Yeah, exactly. But I wouldn't be surprised if after the injuries of this past season and COVID still being so prevalent and the injuries even of the Tampa season too, they wouldn't be a little bit more wary and fill those spots. And Justin's a great person to do that with because he's just like, if you want it, like this is a team. If you're talking even Vision 6-9, obviously maybe he doesn't fit into that, but like the bedrock of that is versatility. right? And it's the switchability, and I think he does one of those things really well, and being a versatile player. And like that 3-point shooting that you're talking about, I don't understand why that wouldn't translate onto like an NBA floor.
Yeah, I mean, it's, the sample size is pretty small and all that, but I would think that just the fact that he was able to get up 6 or 7 a game down in the G League, like that has to help. And I know the Raptors are a team that fancies themselves a team that can turn guys' strokes around. So yeah, I'm fully Champagnie pilled. I think he stands a pretty good chance of being a regular rotation guy by December, January next year, just based on what he did last year. All of the stuff is so Raptors-y, the stuff that he's good at. And if he can be like even just sort of like a passable offensive player, I think the defense will play. And, he'll be right in there if a guy gets hurt and he needs to slot in for like a Thad Young or an Otto Porter needs some time off or something like that. I think he could be easily that guy, because Dalano Banton, as much as he's shown a lot, which we'll get to in a sec, maybe is more of a sort of on-ball guy in a way that Champagnie probably isn't. So we'll get into Dalano Banton and some other big takeaways from Summer League from Katie Heindl coming up in just 1 second here. But first, I want to tell you about our friends over at Built Bar, who are making the best tasting protein bars in the world, and they have also dipped their toe into the marshmallow puff game. And it's not the marshmallow puffs you get from the grocery store that are processed and crappy and bad for you. These are actually good for you. They're made with collagen protein. They absorb quicker into your body, have tons of health benefits. You can eat something that tastes good and it's good for you. And their new flavor, the coconut brownie chunk puff, is dynamite. It is probably the best bar that they've ever made before. Now it's in puff form. It makes it feel like you're having something indulgent when you're actually not. You're actually having something that can be a nice meal replacement. It can power you for a workout. Every bar is covered in 100% real chocolate. It's fluffy. It's like a cloud of coconut brownie goodness. And the best part, of course, is they taste amazing while making it guilt-free, because they're good for you. They're a perfect treat when you got a craving. You need to satisfy that sweet tooth. Maybe you're like me and you're like a late-night snacker, and instead of something like a bag of chips, you can go for this, and it's much, much better for you. Delicious coconut, rich, sweet brownie, cream and marshmallow. Stop fantasizing. Go to Built.com right now to order your coconut brownie chunk puffs. Built.com. That's the promo code LOCKED15 as well to get 15% off your order. Promo code LOCKED15 at Built.com. Get your coconut brownie chunk puffs now. All right, we continue on here with your first listen of the day, digging into Summer League takeaways with Katie Heindl, who is still recovering from 6 days down in Vegas, which seems like a long time, Katie. That seems like a very long time.
It seems like it, and it sounds like it, and when I think back on it, I was like, 2 days. Time just melts.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, let's go to big takeaways from Summer League for you. We don't need to get into the game against the Jazz necessarily. They won 80-74. Jeff Dowtin was really good once again. Christian Coloco, a little bit uneven offensively, had a nice post up, but it's probably not something that you're going to write home about in terms of a performance from Coloco. Dalano Banton, a little bit less prolific than he's been through the first couple games. Really ugly Summer League game, kind of a classic ugly Summer League game, really. But they've been down there for over a week now. Katie, you spent some time covering practice, stuff like that. Did you have any sort of big takeaways, maybe on Dalano Banton and how the team's viewing him and how he's kind of coming into his own? Also, Jeff Dowtin's a guy that lots of people have been interested in because he's scoring so bloody efficiently. They might have a second two-way spot that they want to hand out to a guy like that, perhaps. What are your sort of overall takeaways from taking in the experience with the Raptors down in Vegas?
Yeah, I got to say, in person, I also sat down with Dalano. But watching Dalano in that first game, I was really surprised and pretty pleasantly surprised, because the first half of that game was not so great. Yeah. But I do attribute that to just this is the first time the team was all out there collectively. That's something that we talked about a lot, in the days leading up to it, because of the opportunity to sit down with so many people. Was it just asking them questions about the game? A lot of it was just we got to play first, the scrimmages and practices and shoot-arounds are one thing, but kind of collectively getting out on the floor, you saw where they were pretty looked a little too zany at times, sure. I'd say.
Much like the worst of the regular Raptors. The organizational symmetry is unbelievable.
True. But in the second half of that game, when they ended up winning against the Sixers, it was Dalano who honestly led that team, led the team to the win. Armani Brooks wasn't such a killed it. Yeah, he killed it, but also his shooting Like his just
Mm-hmm.
steady scoring. His rebounding was great. He was probably the quietest kind of presence on the floor in like an anchoring sense when you look at the kind of greenness and rawness of everybody else around him. So he really stood out to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then afterwards, like we chatted with Dalano in a scrum, and he was pretty calm. He's just like, you got to take what we learned here and go forward. They had not a great second game, but that third game last night was great. So I don't know what Dalano. As someone who watched him in summer league last season, he's grown a lot.
Yeah,
and he's learned how to put his long variety of skills together. I think he's still getting a little bit better about picking his spots and picking his moments and not really unraveling, basically just slowing down. But that's like, it's very hard within the pace of summer league, which is nonstop. It's not the place for like steady basketball.
Yeah, it's interesting because like the whole thing on Banton coming out of the draft is that he's kind of slow, plodding, sort of takes his time to let things develop.
Found him like that, honestly.
Well, that's the thing is,
found him like that.
The whole thing in summer league last year was that they were like, play faster, and he was like, okay, and then he started running like a damn gazelle, and it was awesome. And it's interesting now that they're trying to reintroduce some of that sort of more nuance, maybe sort of, the surveying of the floor instead of just like jetting down the floor. There's a little bit more sort of, all right, well, how can I set up the offense in a way that's effective here as opposed to just going, head down to the rim. And like, that's great to see the development of the sort of yin and yang of, hey, yeah, you really got to play fast. This is where you're going to be at your best, but here's how you can kind of rein it in a little bit. And it's kind of the best of both worlds of draft night Banton, who again, nobody really knew. And everyone just had their thoughts on how he operated. And that's probably also to do with like the cramped floor in college basketball, not really being, set up for a guy like Banton to really succeed, but then to take the direction of the coaching staff to just play fast all the time, and then now to be able to kind of work some of that more nuanced stuff in is really exciting. And I, much like Champagnie, I think he's right in the conversation. If things get weird, there's injuries, they have to go break glass in case of emergency in spots, feels like he's probably right on the cusp of getting into that sort of next wave of guys for the Raptors rotation as well. And I got to say, Katie, like, I'm glad that they're starting now to, this is the thing that happens when you go and win a title and trade away first round picks and, prioritize getting talent in the door. You kind of lose that shadow core, the back part of the roster of young dudes who were kind of there to eventually fill in important spots when guys step out. And it's nice to see now that between Champagnie, Banton, and Koloko, I think that trio kind of feels like that new shadow core. I don't know if any of them is ever going to, produce a Pascal Siakam or Fred VanVleet like development curve, because those are like once in a lifetime situations that happen twice to the same team. But I feel pretty confident that there's at least 2, maybe 3 rotation players in there, and that is a pretty good place to be for a team that is going to, have a lot of money devoted to their top guys. It's nice to have these guys kind of coming in to fill in the gaps, which is great. Wanted to ask you about Jeff Dowtin, because he's obviously been really good. He's putting up buckets. He led the team in scoring in the Jazz game, has been efficient, shooting better than 50% in all these games as well. 25 years old, maybe doesn't quite fit the profile of like a long, rangy Raptors-y do. He's more of a buckets man, which, hey, we love a buckets man over here. Any inkling as to sort of how the team views him based on your time spent around them? Or is that more of a like summer league story that's nice that probably won't result in any sort of NBA deal for him?
Unfortunately, maybe the latter. But then I also want to preface that with saying he wasn't really a factor in the first game, which is, again, the game that I saw in person. Nor did I really get to see much of him in practice. So I've got a huge blind spot there I can cop to.
Sure.
But knowing what we know about the franchise, and another thing I wanted to mention is that the Raptors also just signed Ron Harper Jr. to a 2-way.
Yep.
And the other guy that I thought fit more with what they're trying to build, or what we know of them trying to build, is DJ Wilson.
Right. Well, he's signed to a regular deal. So.
Yes, but he looks good too. I don't know that, like, I feel like just scoring is not enough.
Yeah. I mean, that's sort of the Jalen Harris thing, right?
To say. Yeah.
It's just, they have a type. You need to have those types of guys in summer league for sure. And those are the kind of guys who make summer league, I'm sure, very fun when you get a guy who's on a heater and you're in the building, and this guy who no one's ever heard of is going nuts. Like, that's really cool. But, I've seen sort of some sentiment like, oh, maybe he can help off the bench or something. And it's like, he's not going to play. If he did make the team, he wouldn't play. He'd be the 15th man or a two-way guy. You can get a little carried away with what a summer league performance might mean for the big club. But either way, I love when guys show out, and hopefully someone somewhere, maybe a team with a little bit more in terms of bucket getting needs and a less deep roster, goes and finds Jeff Dowtin and says, hey, here's a two-way, here's a regular deal, come compete for a job. That's great. And that's kind of the beauty of summer league is, it doesn't always have to be with the team that you were playing for that you go and get your shot with. And, Dowtin had some NBA cup of coffee last year, 9 games over 4 teams. One of the, I think, the beneficiaries of everyone having to have replacement players and stuff like that because they mismanaged the COVID situation in the middle of the year so poorly. But, hopefully that can lead to better things for him. I'm just not sure it's going to be with the Raptors, despite him being a fun story.
That's the caveat, right? That's what I meant when I said probably not enough. It's not enough for Toronto.
Yeah,
but I hope it will be a case of like, Ishmael Wainwright last year.
Yeah.
And like, no, the team didn't sign him, but then the Suns did come along. So I'm sure there will be a team that watches him show out like that and is just like, oh, hell yeah, like we could use some more just straight firepower.
I mean, he just cooked the Jazz last night. The Jazz might be out of scoring 2 guards sometime soon here. So, match made in heaven. We're going to finish up, and we're going to do a little rapid fire, Katie. I'm going to throw some Vegas-related questions at you, and you're going to regale me with tales of your time down at Summer League because I am stuck here in little Hamilton, Ontario, and didn't get to go to Vegas, because they got other stuff going on. We're going to come back with that in just one sec, but first, I want to tell you about our friends over at Locked On NBA, the daily NBA podcast covering all angles of the NBA with daily rotating casts of hosts from the Locked On Network. Folks like Nick Angstad and John Corrales and Tony East, pals we've had on this podcast before, doing a great job over on that Locked On NBA podcast each and every day. Go check it out on all your favorite podcast apps and on YouTube. And with that, Katie, let's get into Sean asked Katie about things she did in Summer League and lives vicariously through her. No, not at all. I asked this because, the Summer League, of course, is like a place where the whole NBA flocks. There's NBA dudes all around. It's just NBA stew. And when you hear people talk about Summer League, you get some really fun anecdotes about NBA interactions, people you come across, conversations you eavesdrop on all that stuff. I was listening to our friend Keith Parrish and Sean Keane on the Fast Break Breakfast podcast that they recorded from what it sounded like a closet somewhere.
No, it was on
Vegas.
the concourse.
It was on the concourse.
At
Perfect.
the arena. At the arena studio.
Awesome. So they were doing a podcast, and Keith was talking about how he was at a Summer League game, and in front of him was Jerry West, who was screaming at officials
for gum.
like he's on the winning time, as though that show maybe kind of had some accurate intonations to it, despite the gripes and the Supreme Court ruling that's coming on it sometime soon. So Katie, my question to you is, what was maybe you were there for the Jerry West thing. If so, please don't use that answer because I just spoiled it. But what was your best NBA related interaction with a random person down in Summer League this year?
I do have a Jerry West story, but it's for off air. I'll tell you when we're done recording.
I'm so excited.
That guy was just everywhere. What was mine? I was very upset I didn't see Rasheed Wallace. Our friend Keith apparently saw him coming out of the bathroom at the sports book at the Aria Hotel on the first day. And when I heard that, my heart rate sped up. But I never got to see him, which sucked a lot.
Always a bummer, yeah.
Brennan Ingram held a door for me at the Wynn.
Lovely.
I was going to the media party, which Rui Hachimura was DJing at for a couple songs.
Oh, what was he spinning?
I don't know, just nondescript. But I walked by with Jerome Chang, and Jerome was like, "Hey, good job, man," and Rui was like, "Thank you." He seemed nervous. I overheard Zach LaVine ask a group of his friends, and I don't know which one they were talking about, but he was very excited, and he was like, "How do you play that game?" And we were walking. I was in the blackjack table area at a casino. So maybe it was blackjack, but I feel like he must know how to play blackjack.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll say it's really I've been to a casino or a couple in my time, not many. Mostly when I was in school in Ottawa, we would go to Casino Lac Leamy because it was the cool thing to do because you could get in when you were 18. I am not a huge casino guy, and it's because I find each table very intimidating and like. It seems like everyone there knows exactly what's up, and if you sit down and have any sort of questions, you're the loser who gets sort of shunned. So I don't love that vibe with like the social aspect of it and feeling like I'm a doofus in front of strangers. But
no, you got to get over it. I played roulette for the first time with our friend Keith Parrish and also Rob Mahoney of The Ringer. And all I did was ask questions every single turn.
Roulette's one that I've had no luck with in the past.
Downtown Las Vegas, which is a little bit more of a laid back vibe, I gotta say. What else? I feel like I'm bored. Some of these are just I don't think I can share the story.
That's fine. We can go to the next rapid fire question, Katie.
You should ask, and I think he will talk about this, but you should ask Keith Parrish about his interaction with Andre Iguodala. It's one of the funniest stories I've ever heard. But I think he's saving it for an episode of Fast Break, so I'll plug that in advance.
Yeah. Listen to Fast Break Breakfast. Subscribe to the Patreon. They're lovely folks over there. The other question I have for you is kind of related to what we were just talking about. What is your favorite casino game, Katie? What do you spend your most time at? Are you a slots person? Are you at the tables? What's your Vegas game?
Yeah, I'm a slots person. You sound disappointed.
No, that's what I do too, because there's no one to embarrass myself in front of. I just gotta press a button. It's great.
You're going at your own pace. Maybe you've got friends around you pressuring you to do certain bets, but for the most part, you're just deciding yourself. I discovered a game called Godzilla vs. King Kong. Joy Devine and I of Round Bell Rock found that.
Hell yeah.
And we won pretty big the first time, but Kong really took us to town a couple other times.
There's the title of the podcast.
But that's a pretty fun game. And I gotta specify, these are 1 cent. I'm playing like penny slots. You can bet more.
Sure.
But I'm trying to bet the minimum for maximum return. And also just to like sit there for longer, so you don't put $20 in and then like 2 minutes later you're like, all right, see ya. What were some other good games? Ghostbusters 4D.
Ooh.
You like interact with the screen and it's got a rumble chair. It was a little bit overstimulating, but it's
like
pretty
shoot
fun.
Slime at you and stuff. Is it that
interactive? It
interactive?
does, like on the screen, like it looks like the slime is coming. Slimer's flying around. Found a really old game called Kenny Rogers the Gambler slot machine. Where
does
Kenny
it play
Rogers,
the song the whole time?
It plays like a different. It plays like a like a weird kind of like if you were watching a Western and they were going somewhere kind of.
The travel montage.
That's what the song. Just that song. I don't know why he didn't license his own song for the game, but he did it. But he talks in the game. And when you leave the game, he says, "Seems like you know when to fold them." So I love that. I think we've talked about this before, but my favorite slot in Vegas is a Dolly Parton slot machine that used to exist in Caesars and is gone because searched for it one night with Sean Keane and Joy Devine. I got really depressed to the point where I was like, I want to go back to my hotel. This night is over. But then
that's too bad.
Joey found it on find the slots like directory, and it was moved to Planet Hollywood. Went there on the last night. She didn't help me out. I will say because that machine is usually like an ATM. I just I think last summer league I put in $20, played for like 2 spins and won $200.
Hell yeah!
This time she took all my money.
Damn it! Is Dolly telling you to go back to working 9 to 5, Katie? You gotta get more money. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Last one for you, Katie. Go ahead.
I did see Ty Lue in the Aria looking
Okay.
like he was having a great time, if you know what I mean.
Did he beat someone at blackjack and then step over them?
He was
just
giggling
to get the power back.
He was like giggling away from the blackjack tables with like a bunch of Clippers people. So I feel like maybe they just cleaned somebody out.
Was one of the people Steve Ballmer? Was he giggling with Ty Lue?
Steve Ballmer did sit in front of Keith Parrish once, and Keith sent me a picture of the back of his head.
Oh man, wild! I gotta get myself down to Summer League. It sounds
and I
so
saw Kylo Quinn.
Bizarre.
Kylo Quinn came in to watch the Raptors game, and he sat in front of me, and he looked so happy per usual.
We love Kylo Quinn. He's the best guy. Last one for you, Katie. What was the best thing you ate and the worst thing you ate while in Vegas?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I got taken to Nobu, so that was definitely the best thing. And I did the omakase tasting menu, which is like a staged course. Like I don't even know how. I lost track of the courses, paired with like wine. So this was a great thing to be treated to. Also, a real high point where the week then just kind of slid. The worst thing, but a thing I always feel weird if I don't eat. Is a rebel dog, which is named after the UNLV team.
Yep.
They serve at the arena. It's also going to be your cheapest arena concession option.
Sure.
Ate that in my traditional place, which is on top of the garbage cans around the concourse with Keith Parrish. Tried to go stand behind the No Dunks guys when they were recording their podcast live in the arena, but they finished, and I ended up just eating this hot dog while meeting Skeets for the first time.
Well, that's it sounds great to me. I love hot dogs and I love Skeets, so you really can't go wrong there. Although, arena hot dogs, real hit or miss. Sometimes they're great, sometimes they're the worst thing you've ever had. And I'm sorry it was the worst thing you had while you were there, Katie. This was certainly not the worst episode of the podcast we've done this week, because I've done two solo shows, so this is at the very least second best. Katie, thanks so much. Look, man, Big V is you and Big V are neck and neck for the top spot this week. I can promise you the two solo shows were not there. But either way, thank you for hanging out. Thanks for regaling us with tales of Summer League. Anything you'd like to promote for the good people out there?
I will be having the writing I'm going to do off of Summer League once I get myself together. Will be at Yahoo Sports Canada, so I'll probably have a feature on Ron Harper Jr., who I got to interview and sit down with, who's a real sweetheart. And I just think a very inspiring story, and then just a general kind of look forward as to what this Summer League performance means for the Raptors team going forward, kind of with what you and I were talking about, whether that's some of the later spots on the roster or just kind of the shape of things to come.
Sure. We'll keep our eyes peeled for that for sure. Thanks as always, Katie, for hanging out. Thanks to you for listening and making us your first listen of the day. Go make your second listen of the day. Locked On NBA, as I promised earlier. They're fantastic. They're covering the league in an amazing way and giving all sorts of different angles to the Kevin Durant and Donovan Mitchell and all that stuff going on. So go check out Locked On NBA, favorite podcast app, and on YouTube. I'll remind you again. That's going to do it.
Some news? Like maybe rumors, secret news?
Ooh, yes,
unfortunately.
Please. We've started the wind down of the show, and so it's like not all the people are going to see it, which is great. It makes it more secret.
Masai and John Marks were talking in the shadows.
Who looked like they were in the power position?
Arena tunnels. Well, always Masai. Masai.
Yeah. It's gotta be a difficult negotiation to go into. It's like, all right, Masai, you're the guy who fleeces everybody all the time. Let's talk about a trade, I guess. Yeah. You're just like staring into your own doom. It's it's gotta be tough.
It's like one of those mirrors that reflects your worst fears back at you. That's Masai.
I'm fully convinced this staring contest is going to go on till like September at the earliest. So we'll have plenty of time to dig into Sean Marks getting dummied by Masai Ujiri in conversations. But yeah, we'll wrap it up there. Thank you for tuning in. That's the last show for this week. I'm traveling tomorrow. I won't be able to record a show. Back again on Monday, as usual, with Big V. And then hoping to line up a couple of fun guests for next week. And that should be great as well. And we'll talk to you again on Monday. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.